Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 15th of September 2021. Alright everyone, let's get into it. A very, very big last 24 hours. It's going to take me a while to get through everything, I think. But before I do, I just wanted to give a quick shout out that I was on David Hoffman's Layer Zero podcast as part of Bankless here, where we basically spoke about a lot more than just Ethereum. This was the first podcast I think I've ever done where I spent the majority of the time not talking about Ethereum. So we spoke, of course, about Ethereum for a chunk of it, but we also spoke about things like the meaning of life and the topic of longevity, like a lot of longevity research going on these days. It was a great convo, and as I say here on my tweet, it's probably my favorite show that I've ever done, to be honest. And I've already received a lot of great feedback on it from Daily Gwei community members and just other friends out there. So definitely go give it a listen and a watch. After the refuel today, if you'd like. I thought it was a great convo. So yeah, be sure you don't miss it. But yeah, moving on. So the reason why the last 24 hours was crazy is because not only did a kind of like competitor network Solana go offline, but Arbitrum went offline as well. And you can see my little kind of like shit post here where I said that Solana and Arbitrum shaking hands going offline. Now, I do want to start with exactly what happened and what the differences are between these sorts of things. So what ended up happening with Solana, from what I can tell, there hasn't been an official post-mortem yet, but what ended up happening is that there was some IDO going on, initial DEX offering going on that was pretty hyped up, pretty popular, and a bunch of bots spammed the network with transactions and basically overloaded the network with transactions. I think they said they peaked at like 400,000 transactions per second before all the validators kind of like fell over and the network essentially went offline. The network was offline for, I think, it had to have been at least 12 hours or more. I mean, I went to bed with it being offline, then I got up and it was still offline. So it was definitely more than 12 hours. So that's essentially what happened with Solana, and the whole network was offline. You couldn't do anything. You couldn't do any transactions. You weren't able to get you weren't able to access your funds or anything like that. You just had to wait until the network was essentially restarted, which is a pretty big deal, right? It's pretty bad. And I don't want to spend like the whole episode going on about why I think this is pretty shitty, and on top of that, why I guess I don't know if I've mentioned on the refuel before, but I've been speaking to people about this in both the Discord channel and just privately with people, where I think that Solana's way of scaling is just not the right way forward. But I'll get into that in a sec. I did want to discuss Arbitrum going offline as well, which is hilarious because what are the chances of both Solana and Arbitrum going offline at the same time? And there was a bit of conspiracies going around that this is kind of like an attack, and I don't think it was an attack. I think really what ended up happening with Solana was kind of like a bit of a bug. I guess they didn't expect such intense demand, and that's kind of like what happens when you have like a low fee network. Good bots can just spam it, especially if there's profit opportunities there. But what happened with Arbitrum is that their sequencer, which is their block producer essentially, kind of like went offline, and you weren't able to do any transactions on layer 2. But the thing is, and there's a major difference here that I want to kind of like focus on or kind of like zoom in on. Solana going offline is very different to Arbitrum going offline. And the reason is because Solana going offline means that, as I said, no one can access their funds on Solana. There's no way to do so. You have to wait until the validators come back online, until the network's up and running again. You are literally stuck. You can't do anything. Now, with Arbitrum, because it's a layer 2 network and it's secured by Ethereum, you can always access your funds even if Arbitrum goes completely offline and never comes online again. You can access your funds from the bridge contract, which they call the inbox, after a certain period of time. Yes, there's still the 1 week withdrawal delay and everything like that, but you can still get your funds out. And you don't have to kind of rely on Arbitrum coming back online or the network coming back online or anything like that. You can still get your funds out. And Ethereum being the base layer that powers all of that, as long as Ethereum is live, it's fine. And Ethereum's liveness is 100%. It's been up for 100% uptime since Genesis. There are some kind of debates around, is it really 100% because we had the Shanghai DOS attacks in late 2016. We've had periods of time where the chain I guess was slower because of the difficulty bomb, and we've also had a couple of close calls in terms of like network splits and some consensus failures between clients. But for all intents and purposes, Ethereum kept producing blocks, which means that it had 100% uptime from Genesis. Now, will that continue into the future? We don't know. This could definitely happen to Ethereum, where the whole network was to go offline. It would be, I think, probably a lot worse for Ethereum than it is for like if it happened now, because Solana is obviously a much smaller and younger network. But still, it still wasn't good for Solana. It's not good for Ethereum. But the magic of layer 2 and the magic of scaling via layer 2 is that it kind of like spreads out that risk at the end of the day. Like Arbitrum going offline didn't affect any of the other layer 2s, didn't affect Ethereum layer 1. And if they never came back online, I mean, obviously they did, but if they never came back online, it would be fine because you'd be able to get your funds out from layer 1. Now, there are second order effects here of networks like layer 1 networks going offline. You can see here, CometShock put together this thread about potentially what could happen when Solana came back online. This was before it came back online, and none of this ended up eventuating. But the TLDR of this thread is that because there's DeFi on Solana, of course, because there's kind of different things like loans and stuff like that, and because the price of Sol moved from what it was when the chain went down to kind of like when it came back online, that there could have been kind of mayhem, like lots of MEV opportunities, lots of profit opportunities, lots of users getting stung, lots of liquidations and stuff happening. But the funny thing is that by the time the Solana network went back online, the price of Sol was essentially within, I think, 10 cents of what it was when the network went offline. And there was a bit of conspiracy theories about this, saying that basically all the Solana whales banded together and made sure that the network was able to kind of, the price was basically within 10 cents of what it was when the network went down, so none of this kind of crazy stuff happened. I don't know how much truth there is to that. It definitely makes sense because, I mean, for anyone paying attention, one of the biggest kind of backers and biggest whales in the Solana ecosystem is SBF, the CEO and founder of FTX, and he's a market maker. So it wouldn't be far-fetched to say that he played a role in getting the price back to where it was so that this kind of stuff didn't happen. But who knows? I'm not interested in dealing with conspiracies today. But yeah, this is a good thread reading through what are the possible consequences. And this can happen at layer 2 as well, of course, because layer 2 has DeFi ecosystems on it too, and has the kind of same things happening here. But it depends how long it's offline for as well, and all that sorts of stuff, and how much of an ecosystem there is as well. There's another great, more technical thread from Daniel here from Arbitrum, Daniel Goldman, if you want to read about what actually happened with Arbitrum and why it was down for about 45 minutes. And he's quote tweeting basically this tweet from Arbitrum, which is their official kind of like outage report, which you can go read here. But I definitely recommend reading Daniel's thread as well, because it breaks down a lot of things, links to a lot of great resources. It is more technical, but still quite accessible. Kris here from MakerDAO basically put out a TLDR about the Arbitrum outage. So if you don't want to go read the technical stuff, the TLDR is that, as I said, sending transactions on layer 2 via that sequencer was not possible, but users could force any transaction via Ethereum layer 1, such as funds withdrawal, and funds were never at risk. And this is exactly why we care about layer 2s. In the worst case, it's still Ethereum. And this is why we harp on about this all the time, right? I mean, we always talk about this as a community. I always talk about it on the Refuel constantly. I mean, all the time. And today's newsletter is actually detailing Ethereum's kind of like scaling roadmap and why I believe that the rollup centric roadmap is the best way to scale a blockchain. But I'm going to go into that in a sec. I've actually got a tweet about that. And then Anatoly, the CEO of Solana Labs here, actually put out a kind of tweet replying to someone where he said, what's going to happen with the network? This person asked Anatoly, which is who's the CEO of Solana Labs. And Anatoly says, same thing that happened to ETH during the Shanghai attacks. And then Toby Kitty here replied saying, Ethereum did not go down, not the same thing. And then Anatoly said, sure, there was a bug, but they fixed it. Life went on, same thing. I think this is a false equivalence. I don't think this is the same thing at all. And Hudson Jameson put together a great thread here explaining why what happened on Solana is not the same that happened with the Shanghai attacks in 2016. And Hudson goes on to say both attacks were denial of service attacks or DOS attacks meant to halt block production. So that is similar. But the big difference is that Ethereum blocks never stopped producing during the attacks because of the multi-client design architecture. And Solana literally had to do a network restart. So yeah, I didn't like that. And I also didn't like the fact that some of the things that Anatoly was saying in general, I guess like targeted towards Ethereum, especially over the last few days before this kind of like halt happened, or this kind of like Solana going offline happened, were kind of very disingenuous. And I mean, I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a sec. I did want to highlight one last thing here, was that in the last 24 hours as well, someone unsuccessfully tried to attack the Ethereum mainnet by publishing a 550 block deep kind of chain that contained invalid proof of works. And this only affected a small percentage of Nethermind nodes that switched to this invalid chain, but all other clients rejected the long side chain as invalid, as is supposed to be there. So it's just funny how all this stuff happens together. And I mean, for the conspiracy theorists out there, They would say this was all planned, or this is a kind of an attack on the networks. Who knows? We never know for sure, but it might be a little bit of a stretch to say that. So yeah, I mean, there's a bit of discussion in this thread in Marius's thread here if you want to check it out and learn more about that there. But this all brings me to what I wanted to kind of like talk about for a little bit here. Whereas I put out a tweet today and I said, I'm actually pretty tired of trying to play nicely with other ecosystems or trying to not be toxic, or whatever that means these days. Solana goes offline for 10 plus hours and the CEO is on Twitter just fighting Ethereum as some sort of damage control. It's pathetic. I'm going to be honest, I'm very, very sick of just lying back and pretending like, everything's fine and we shouldn't defend Ethereum against these attacks and kind of like being scared to say something because people are just going to call me a toxic ETH maxi. I don't care anymore. And if you see me start to have this attitude on Twitter, not the attitude of personally attacking people, not spreading misinformation, but fighting back against all the bullshit that comes Ethereum's way, don't be surprised, because I'm honestly sick of it at this point, because it's just really unfair that the Ethereum ecosystem is supposed to sit idly by while not just random people on Twitter, the kind of people that are heavily involved with other ecosystems are just there spreading crap about Ethereum and kind of like continuously fighting it. I mean, for the last 2 weeks, all we've heard from particularly the Solana ecosystem is that Ethereum is dead, it's going to get flipped, the gas fees are ridiculous, which, I mean, okay, the gas fees are ridiculous, but they're not saying it in such a way that they're like, okay, how do we fix this? They're saying it as a way to deride Ethereum, and not only are random people on Twitter saying this, it's also people like Anatoly, the CEO of Solana Labs, their biggest backers, and they're not just saying this publicly, they're definitely saying this privately as well. So it's just really frustrating to see that all play out, and I'm done playing nice, really, at the end of the day. This isn't a space where, I mean, yes, the ecosystem is multi-chain, but that doesn't mean that each chain doesn't want to be as valuable as it can be and as big as it can be. And pretty much like all the other Ethereum competitors, they want to be bigger than Ethereum. Their community wants them to be bigger than Ethereum. So why would the Ethereum ecosystem be expected to sit by and let this happen? And, to the point of like, I guess on the flip side as well, you have Bitcoin, where the Ethereum ecosystem has been saying, we're going to flip Bitcoin, and Bitcoin has fought back against that. And so they should. They shouldn't sit there and take it either. Like when you're getting attacked or kind of like getting derided by a specific community, you don't just sit there and take it. You defend yourself. You stand up for what you believe in and what's right at the end of the day. And that's exactly what I'm going to be doing for Ethereum, what I have been doing for Ethereum for a long time. But I guess on Twitter over the last few months, I kind of slowed down a bit there because my following grew and I kind of had all these trolls and everything. But really, I don't even care anymore. I'm just going to, I just block the trolls now straight away. I don't even deal with them anymore. If you're going to say something stupid, I'm going to block you for it, essentially. So yeah, and as I said, like it's one thing for random people on Twitter to say this. It's a whole nother thing for people who are respected and who are viewed as kind of legitimate figures within this space to say these sorts of things. So I really hope that they either stop saying it, or I hope that people don't consider me toxic for calling this bullshit out, because I don't think it's toxic to correct misinformation at the end of the day, right? I guess like other than that, the last thing I wanted to talk about that had to do with all of this was basically Ethereum's future again. Now, I wrote about this in the Daily Gwei newsletter today about how Ethereum's scaling and why I think it's the best way forward. But essentially, I put out this tweet where I said, a decentralized and secure base layer with a bustling and innovative layer 2 ecosystem built on top. Ethereum's rollup-centric roadmap is the only long-term sustainable way to scale to billions of users. I've discussed this before, but just to give you a quick recap here, the way Ethereum is scaling is that layer 1 is always going to be limited in throughput. It is always going to be have less throughput than layer 2, but in return, you get a maximally decentralized and secure base layer that people can run a full node on consumer hardware for. So that's the massive benefit that you get. Whereas on layer 2, whether it be rollups or some other technologies, we can scale to billions of users while inheriting that decentralization and security, because these layer 2 systems inherit the layer 1 guarantees. And what this means is that layer 1 Ethereum becomes a settlement layer, a security layer. Layer 2 becomes the execution layer. So instead of users executing all their transactions on layer 1, as we do today, we will execute our transactions on layer 2, and then they will be settled or finalized, whatever you want to call it, on layer 1 when batches are posted. When Arbitrum, Optimism, the ZK rollups, whatever, post their batches to layer 1, they become settled and finalized. And on top of that, we all have the bonus that we can, if the layer 2 goes offline permanently, we can still get our funds back from layer 1 if the layer 2 is constructed correctly, of course. So that to me is the best long-term sustainable way to scale a blockchain. I think Ethereum is perfectly positioned to do this. I think that eventually all networks will either pivot to this design, all crypto networks, or just end up completely centralized, or they might just become a roll-up of Ethereum itself. I would actually like to see some of the friendlier networks, such as Zcash, for example, simply become a privacy-focused roll-up on Ethereum, which would be really cool. Get rid of their own consensus mechanism, use Ethereum for their security and their decentralization guarantees, and essentially offer people private transactions within their rollup using Zcash as the native currency there, or ZEC, or whatever you want to call it. So, yeah. Anyway, if you want to learn more about that, definitely read today's Daily Gwei newsletter. There's a lot more information in there for that one. But I'm going to move on to, I guess, some of the updates from the last 24 hours. There was updates, a lot of drama, a lot of updates. So Polygon announced that they have started collaborating with EY, which used to be known as Ernst & Young, a very big, as I say, global professional services and technology firm, on building Ethereum scaling and enterprise solutions. So as part of this collaboration, they will work on Polygon Nightfall, a privacy-focused rollup, which is awesome. I mean, disclosure, I'm an advisor to Polygon here, so I'm going to definitely just pump this up a little bit, because I definitely think this is really cool. And it's just as another, I guess, arm to Polygon's suite here. As I've mentioned many times before, Polygon is a suite of scaling solution. It is not just one thing. You can see here on my screen, they have the Polygon SDK, Polygon Hermes that they recently acquired, Polygon Avail, Polygon, the POS chain that we all know and love, and now Polygon Nightfall, with many more things coming. This is really only the beginning of what Polygon is doing here. But this is awesome. I mean, Nightfall has been around for quite a while, actually. I think it's been around since 2017, 2018 maybe, and it's been worked on for quite a while in the enterprise kind of I guess context here. And some people may scoff at this and be like, "Oh, enterprise stuff, that's boring." But it doesn't matter if it's boring. Enterprises are coming and coming to Ethereum and working within Ethereum and working to be part of this ecosystem. So we should be encouraging them to do it. We should be encouraging them to do it the right way, such as becoming a roll-up on Ethereum. How cool is that? EY having their own roll-up in collaboration with Polygon on Ethereum. And this roll-up is actually a hybrid between optimistic roll-ups and ZK roll-ups as well, which I thought was pretty interesting. You can see here a bit more details about this. But there is a blog post here if you want to dive in deeper to this. But I think this is just super cool to see. I think this is maybe one of the first of its kinds of, I guess, like an Ethereum scaling powerhouse like Polygon integrating an enterprise solution, which I think is really, really cool. So speaking of Layer 2 again, there was an announcement here from, I think his name's Agus X, his name here on Twitter, and Philip, I think the other guy's name is. They have decided to build an NFT marketplace on Arbitrum called Smol Puddle. Smol Puddle, which is the first ERC721 or NFT marketplace for Arbitrum, has a decentralized order book using Waku, 99% client-side powered. It doesn't even have tests. Enjoy. So this is a very kind of like experimental alpha version of a marketplace, but like mostly client side, which is really cool to see. And this is what we need. I mean, I hope OpenSea deploys on these sorts of platforms as well, but I do hope that we have more competition there in terms of like marketplaces for NFTs, especially on Layer 2. But it's great to see more stuff coming to Arbitrum. I actually just checked their stats just before. They've got over 100,000 unique addresses have so far interacted with Arbitrum, and they peaked at over 300,000 transactions, I think, a couple of days ago in a day, which was quite crazy. So definitely seeing a lot of growth there. It definitely is Layer 2 season, as I kind of like tweeted out today, where I said, Ethereum Layer 2 season, have a nice little picture of the l2beat.com website where you can see the growth. And it's not just the growth across Arbitrum, of course, in TVL, but DYDX grew 20%, Optimism grew 50%, Loopring 10%, SoRare 40%, Immutable X another 30%. And you can see all the other ones there growing a little bit more, but still steady growth as she goes here, which is really, really cool to see. And speaking of Immutable X, they announced a funding round. So they've done a $60 million Series B, led by Bitcraft Ventures and King River Capital. So they'll be putting this funding towards Immutable X, their Layer 2 ZK, not ZK rollup, the Layer 2 kind of like Validium here, Gods Unchained, and Guild of Guardians as well. And just a disclosure here, I'm an investor in Immutable in their kind of like last round So, but like, I've been a supporter for them for quite a while, and they're a Sydney-based team, so Aussie homegrown team, and I'm just like, I mean, I love them because they're really prioritizing scaling on Ethereum rather than kind of, I guess, starting their own network for NFTs or going elsewhere for NFTs, which I really, really respect at the end of the day. And they've been around for quite a while. I mean, Gods Unchained has been around for a long time now. Immutable X as a solution's been around for maybe about a year, and they do have their kind of token sale coming up. I think I spoke about that, I guess, a little while ago, when I mentioned that unfortunately they couldn't do an airdrop to US users of the IMX token, so they're doing like an airdrop of ETH instead, which I think is a cool middle ground. I wish DYDX did something like that, but still, can't win them all at the end of the day. You guys are being protected, right? In the US, just a bit of insanity there, but congrats to Immutable for raising this amount of money. I mean, that's a huge raise, $60 million. These raises just seem to be getting bigger and bigger as time goes on. And I mean, it makes sense because there's so much money flooding into this ecosystem, but I do wonder how many of these valuations will hold for a lot of these projects going forward, especially if we go into like a longer term bear market eventually. It's going to be fun to see kind of like what happens here. Not to say that, Immutable X will fall into this or whatever, but there are definitely going to be some companies out there that raised way too much money on way too high a valuation, and they're going to come back down to earth, I think. So Zapper announced that Season 2, the details of Season 2 of their Zapper Quests and NFTs here. So there's a bit of, the blog post wanted to error out here. Hopefully it doesn't error out again. Okay, yeah, it loaded. So this Season 2 is starting on September 23rd, running until January 1st, which is much longer than Season 1, I believe. And in Season 2, you can basically get more involved than you could in Season 1. So there's rarity levels and crafting. You can use your Season 1 NFTs to craft different Season 2 NFTs here, do quests as usual, kind of like level up and earn EXP and stuff like that. So if you enjoyed Season 1, definitely get involved with Season 2. I mean, I always enjoy it, of course. I enjoy using my Zapper dashboard and everything like that. I mean, I love Zapper. Disclosure, I'm a seed investor in Zapper. I did mention that I've got that website coming out soon with all my disclosures on it, so I didn't have to keep saying that soon. I mean, so much stuff happening, I can't even focus on it. I mean, sometimes I go to it and be like, oh, I should be, building this. I should get this done, and then I just get distracted by something else. But anyway, definitely check out these blog posts for more details on Season 2 and what's happening here. But I'm going to move on to the last thing I wanted to talk about, which was more stuff around regulations. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this because I think this is really important. But there was an interesting tweet from Tom Emmer here, who's a representative, who's a congressman in Minnesota in the US, where he says, and I guess some context first, Gary Gensler had a meeting with, I can't remember who exactly it was with, but there was some big regulatory stuff over the last 24 hours where Gary Gensler was talking about crypto regulations and to Congress and kind of like walking them through it. And he said a few things that was wrong, but Tom Emmer here put out a tweet and kind of asked, is Gary Gensler actually attempting to assume authority over stablecoins by rebranding them as stable value coins? So there's a lot to unpack just from this statement. One, Gary Gensler, for those who don't know, is the chair of the SEC. So he's the head of the SEC currently. For him to be calling these things stable value coins instead of referring to them as stable coins is a massive red flag. One, because it shows that he hasn't actually done his research here. No one calls them stable value coins. No one. Like, it's always stable coin. No one has ever said stable value. I've never said it, stable value coin, right? And if you had even done a bit of cursory research into this ecosystem, then you would know that. So obviously he hasn't done his research on this. Two, it shows that he's going to be trying to regulate something he doesn't even understand, which I think is a load of bullshit, to be honest. Like, you shouldn't be able to regulate things that you have close to no understanding of, which I don't think he has very much understanding of this ecosystem. People always point to the fact that he taught, I guess, like Bitcoin at Harvard or something like that. I can't remember what kind of like university in the US he taught at, but it doesn't matter because Bitcoin, is relatively simple to understand compared to Ethereum, DeFi, the crypto space at large. So I don't think that actually means anything. Unless Gary has actually sat down and learnt about DeFi, learnt about Ethereum, learnt about all the different things going on, then I don't think him and the SEC have any right to try and regulate this industry before they understand it. And there was another comment that he made as well. I think he was answering a question about something, and I can't remember exactly what the comment was, but he got something completely wrong about gas fees, where I think that he assumed that there was some central party that had to allow people to do trades on a DEX or something like that. There was some fundamental misunderstanding there. And that, again, just shows the fact that he hasn't done his research. So why is this guy trying to so, heavily regulate crypto, or getting so involved with crypto regulation when he doesn't understand it? Well, I'll tell you why. Because he's protecting protecting his vested interests, which are the traditional finance system. They are the existing institutions. They are the banks. And I was listening to the Bankless podcast with Cathie Wood just today. I finished it up. And she mentioned something where she said that she actually thinks, or at least there's a high chance that crypto, especially with yield products, such as all the yields that we earned on stablecoins and such as something like the Coinbase Lend product, which conspicuously the SEC is making a very big move on, these products are actually taking growth away from banks. And she used the example of, yes, kind of like a market segment. She said something about like the Asian currency crisis and how Boeing only had like 5% exposure to the Asian markets. But the thing is that most of their growth was coming from the Asian markets. So that 5% exposure didn't really matter for their, I guess, like financials. What mattered was the growth. And most of their growth was coming from the Asian markets. And because the Asian markets were coming down and there was a bit of a crash there, their growth crashed along with it. This is the same thing for banks. If these banks are getting, if these banks are losing market share on their products that they're offering yield on to DeFi, to crypto banks like Coinbase and everything like that, then of course they're going to complain to the regulators because the regulators have the power to shut competition down if they want. And this is the unfairness of it. And this is what I spoke about in my newsletter the other day, where I basically said that these are the institutions that we're kind of going after, and now they are fighting us. They've already lost. Like, don't get me wrong. There's no fight here. It's a one-sided battle. They're going to attempt to try and fight us, try to shut us down, try to stop us from doing what we want to do. They've lost. I mean, there's no way they win here. They may be able to stall us for a little while, depending on what regulations they can push through, but they've lost. But regardless of that, this is why this is happening, because DeFi and crypto banks and yield products more specifically are eating into banks' profitability. They're eating into their margins, and the banks have obviously done their research here and seen this, and they're scared. They're fighting and they're fighting back against it. And I totally get why. Like, they don't want to be disrupted, but they are being disrupted. They have been, and they will continue to be. And they have, as I said, they have lost. So there is no fight here. But that is why you're seeing so much increased regulations, I believe. I do not believe it for a second it has anything to do with investor protection. I think that is the biggest load of shit that I have ever heard come from a regulatory agency in my life. I'm being blunt here. There is no such thing as, in my mind, most of these regulators or politicians caring at all about investor protection. Because if they did, they wouldn't be playing kind of favorites. They wouldn't be hypocrites over this, because at the end of the day, in the US especially, you can go gamble as much as you want, right? There's no accredited investor laws, there's no investor protections for gambling. Go piss away all your money on blackjack, or go piss away all your money on a slot machine. The financial regulators don't care, which is insane. I mean, because they're regulating people, and they're preventing people from being able to invest in early stage companies, such as the accredited investor laws, where you have to have $1 million net worth, or you have to basically have like really high income to be able to get access to early investment opportunities, which I would say are much less riskier than going to the casino and blowing your money. But even on top of that, there's other things, like you're allowed to take out hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of student loans at high interest rates to get an education within the US, and they have to be paid back. You can't default on them. You can't declare bankruptcy on them. They have to be paid back. Isn't that much riskier than an early stage investment? I could go on. I could go on for a long time about this. And as you can see, I'm actually really upset about this. And it's something that kind of like really pisses me off when people just straight up lie, where these institutions just straight up lie. And we see it. We know it's bullshit. As a crypto ecosystem, we are here to disrupt these institutions. We're not here to let them walk all over us. And that's why I keep kind of like calling out this crap and calling out investor protection. There's no investor protection. As I mentioned on a refuel, I think last week, if they actually cared, like this is the most obvious example, if they gave a shit about protecting investors, they wouldn't be going after honest companies like Uniswap Labs or Coinbase. They would be going after the actual scammers in this space, of which there are plenty of them to go after. And they're very well-known scammers and, schemers and grifters. There's plenty of them out there. But instead, they choose to go after the honest US-based companies that have generated potentially billions of dollars of economic activity within the US and paid a lot of tax on top of that as well, as I'm sure Coinbase has paid, Uniswap Labs has paid, any of the other US-based DeFi teams have paid. So it's not about protecting investors, it's about protecting institutions and banks, and that's all there is to it in my eyes. So whenever you see this regulation stuff going on, one, don't worry too much about it because the government moves slow. That's what we've got in our favor. And two, if the US decides to continue down this path, people are just going to move. This crypto is a global movement. It's very mobile. You can work on anything from wherever you want in the world. You don't have to have a company. You can just have a DAO. You can manage everything completely on-chain. You don't even have to touch fiat. You can just use stable coins, or you can use Ether as your unit of account and your store of value, whatever. You can use your own native token. There's so much stuff going on here. So at the end of the day, I just think that we don't need these regulators. No one's asking for them. No one wants them. Get out of the way. We don't want you. As simple as that. But anyway, I'm going to end the Daily Gwei rant edition there. And I think that's it for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give that video a thumbs up. Subscribe to the newsletter. Join the Discord channel. And I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.